Welcome back to this Real America's Voice news break. I'm Terrence Bates. Now that President Trump has signed the bill forcing the Justice Department to release all of its files on Jeffrey Epstein, the DOJ has 30 days to comply. The trove of documents should include all files and communications related to the disgraced child predator, as well as any information about the investigation into his death. Some information about victims could be redacted for ongoing federal investigations, but investigators cannot withhold information due to, quote, embarrassment, reputational harm, or political sensitivity. A federal judge who has reviewed the case says there are about 100,000 pages to release. Taking to Truth Social after signing the bill, President Trump began naming names and pointing fingers at Democrats who were associates of Epstein. In this Truth Social post, he writes, quote, Democrat figures such as Bill Clinton, who was on the plane numerous times, Larry Summers, who, of course, has been let go from various boards, including Harvard, sleazebag political activist Reid Hoffman, minority leader Hakeem Jeffries, who he says took money from Epstein, Democrat Congresswoman Stacey Plaskett, and many more. Perhaps the truth about these Democrats and their associations with Jeffrey Epstein will soon be revealed. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky meeting with the U.S. Army delegation in Ukraine today. The meeting comes as the Trump administration is out with a 28-point peace plan aimed at ending the war between Russia and Ukraine. The agreement would reportedly see Ukraine give up some of its land and weapons, including cutting the size of Ukraine's military. President Trump's special envoy, Steve Witkoff, along with Vice President J.D. Vance, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and the president's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, are said to have been instrumental in drafting this proposal. The plan is just now being presented to Ukrainian officials and reportedly leaves room for negotiation. This latest attempt at bringing peace to the region comes after Russian missiles and drones just killed at least 25 people in the latest round of fighting. That's a quick check of your headlines. As always, we appreciate having you along for the ride. Now, back to the Charlie Kirk Show.
On air and on fire for the preservation of our nation. The Charlie Kirk Show.
All right, we're about to get into turning point action with Tyler Boyer and redistricting. So we've got a lot there. Send us your questions. freedom@charliekirk.com. freedom@charliekirk.com. We'll probably do a little news, tell you about what kind of some of the stuff we're working on in this first segment. Now, in segment 2, we're going to take your questions. So first, I want to tell you about Hillsdale College. History, economics, great works of literature. Did you study these things in school? Probably not. But even if you did, it's probably time for an enjoyable refresher. Let the good folks at Hillsdale College help you with that. They have over 40 free online courses, including their newest course on totalitarian novels. It's a free 8-lecture course taught by Dr. Larion, who's the president of the school. He goes in depth on 1984, Brave New World, Darkness at Noon, and That Hideous Strength. These are novels that were written in the 30s and 40s, but they're probably more relevant today than they've ever been because they explain how tyrannical government can impact human nature and our daily lives. So more importantly, they can show us that faith, family, and friends are worth fighting for, and that's really true. These novels go really deep in this. So maybe you read these books in school. Maybe you've heard others talk about them and they seem a little intimidating. They don't have to be intimidating. Let Hillsdale College get the most out of them for you. Go right now to charlieforhillsdale.com to enroll. There's no cost. It's easy to get started. That's charlieforhillsdale.com to register. CHARLIE for Hillsdale.com. All right. Tyler, we're talking about redistricting. This is a fight that's going on in the country right now, and a lot of people are unaware of it. I mean, we hear about Prop 50 in California, and the Texas redistricting fight made a lot of news. But there are other states that are really important. Give us the update. Where do we stand right now?
Yeah, Andrew, it's been actually crazy in the background right now because there's a lot of states that are wholly Republican dominant that are not being helpful whatsoever in the fight against Gavin Newsom and what they've done in California. So as a recap for everyone, Gavin Newsom, we know they just passed the prop for redistricting. They're going to take away essentially 5+ Republican seats off the table pretty clearly. And the only way that you can combat that is with our big Republican states and then a bunch of these other smaller Republican states that can kind of cobble together to help offset this really manipulative hijacking of the electoral system that Gavin Newsom has entered into. And this is all important because remember, Gavin is doing this in part because this is helpful to him in looking like the savior for the Democrat Party as he tries to run for president in 2028. So everything's interconnected. It's all possible. Right now, Indiana, who has Republican state senators in districts that Trump won by 20 to 30 points, that are pushing back on redistricting to gain net 2 seats. So Indiana, one of the historically most Republican states in the country outside of the sad Obama blip that happened in 2008.
Yeah.
But they swear that was not normal.
Yeah.
It really has been one of the most Republican states that we have in the nation. Really has also very Republican metropolitan areas. And there is real justification for a solid through and through red state plan map, if you map it out very fairly, very squarely, for that. But because of the way the process that redistricting works on, and everybody that's a listener needs to become very familiar with this terminology, majority minority districts. So what the Democrats have been doing now for many decades is they've been pushing this concept through lawfare of remapping every state around majority minority districts, meaning that they have to consequentially gerrymander districts to include populations that have their large populations in your state of minority communities.
So this would be Hispanic.
This is
majority.
a classic Voting Rights Act thing.
So this is the Voting Rights Act argument that's being discussed. We won't probably get into the details of it now, but we will probably start to tear this apart over the next year. But essentially, the big ones in America, obviously, are the Hispanic communities, Black communities, and Native American communities in certain areas. Now, Native Americans haven't made up too many, so you haven't seen too many of that. But here in Arizona, you have an argument for one.
You see it
Oklahoma,
at the state level a lot. Yeah.
you see it at the
South
state
Dakota,
level.
We have it for
That's
sure.
right. That's right. State level, it happens a lot more frequently. But the Black community argument, Hispanic community. Now, as Democrats are starting to lose Hispanics, they become much less interested in Hispanic communities, and this is where it's becoming. Well, a lot of Hispanics are actually saying, like, yeah, we don't need to do this. We don't need to just encompass it. They use this to cheat, to essentially just gerrymander more Democrat voters that just happen to be from those minority communities.
So where is that process at now? Because Texas enacts a new map that was basically going to wipe out all the gains they're going to get in California. But then a judge blocks them.
Yes.
Right. And so that is now, maybe Blake, I don't know, who, either one of you can answer this. What is the next step in that process? Because this just broke this week that a federal.
So what I
channel-
saw-
So can we throw in the Florida piece real quick? So while this is all going on, Florida stepped in and they're like, no worries, guys. We're going to actually add another 5 Republican seats. So they're in the process of this.
This gets really risky. Like if you're adding to, the thing about gerrymandering that a lot of people don't get is if you stretch it too hard, you're basically making it. So let's say, for example, let's say in Texas, you made it so every single district exactly matched the state's vote in the last presidential election, just hypothetically. Well, okay, that means, yeah, you won. We won Texas pretty handily. But there are elections where you only win Texas by 5 points or 6. And you can imagine the situation where you would just lose Texas. Like it's plausible if you get in a really bad wipeout, you could lose Texas.
Yeah, like a 2008 Obama.
Yeah, 2008
type wave.
Obama, and then like you do really bad in the House or something. And suddenly you'd get to that point where what happens is you win more seats until suddenly you start losing them, and then you can lose a lot.
Yeah.
So you always
so you
have
could
to be
lose
careful.
more seats
Yes.
too.
Well,
You can
because
lose more seats
because they're
in theory.
taking, and for the viewers at home, the listeners at home, is that you're taking districts that are 10 to 15 points on average plus for Trump, or plus Republican. You look at it 2 different ways. How many points did Trump win by the last presidential, or whoever's the last presidential candidate? And then how many more Republican voters do you have than Democrat voters? The real thing that's in the air is in a lot of these states, Texas included, is you have a lot more independence now than you ever did before. And actually, I owe a phone call back to a North Carolinian. North Carolina is a good example of this. Historically Republican state, tons of independent voters. So if you start messing with the districts too much, like Blake's saying, you might end up in a situation where you have a new community of a lot younger people who aren't registering Republican, they're more independent, that are harder to target, and then they're harder to turn out.
Yeah, and Florida is a good example, actually. Florida right now feels very red to us. It's moved red over time, but
Plus 1 million.
2012, it voted Democrat in a presidential election.
Yeah.
The first time Ron DeSantis ran, he beat Andrew Gillum by
36,000.
extremely narrow. Think about how much history ended up changing on those 30,000 or whatever votes. Holy cow.
This is why ballot chasing matters.
That's why ballot chasing matters for sure.
Because you win by a little bit, you can swing a state for decades.
Well, what did he
you
win on
asked-
his second election? It was like almost 2 million votes. It was
Yeah,
1.6,
he won a
1.7.
massive landslide and
huge landslide.
Yeah, and so you were asking what's next in this Texas case. So this panel said Texas is illegal racial gerrymandering, whatever. Now it's a sort of special one. Usually when you have these court cases in the federal level, it would go district, circuit, Supreme. With these specific election law related cases, they have an accelerated process. So the appeal is directly to the Supreme Court. I've talked to some people familiar with the Supreme Court who've been clerks and such. They think the Supreme Court would probably side with us, but it's a matter of speed because your filing deadlines in Texas, for example, are coming up here in just a couple of weeks. So you would need the Supreme Court to weigh in very quickly, or they might just be stuck with their old House map for matters of practicality, which that's a lot of what this is about. This Texas House map was because they specifically wanted it for this midterm cycle. And if it only kicks in 2028, well, then, you're only 2 years away from a census anyway.
Yeah, throw up this image, by the way. This is the 291. This is the states considering congressional redistricting. You can look on my computer here if you want, Tyler. But so we've got California. They passed Prop 50. Do you approximate how many seats are they going to get?
Right now, the estimation is 5.
So 5. They're going to get 5. How many would Texas get if we get this in time for the midterms?
The plan was 5, I believe.
Yeah.
And Florida, 5.
Is arguing 5.
So we would be, if we get Texas corrected, we're going to be net 5 versus
so
California.
Texas and Florida together would be plus 10. Indiana's plus 2.
Ohio as well, right? It's not on this map. But
So Ohio is probably not going to change.
But I've heard talk that they can get 2 more seats.
Yeah, there's an argument for it that they can. Going back to Blake's point, the question is, should they?
Especially with Vivek running even or maybe slightly behind his
because
Democrat
they're not in a
state.
safe of a spot.
Yeah,
in
fair
some
enough.
Of these
What's the story? What's the story with Missouri? They already passed new maps.
Yeah, I don't have the total update. I'll touch base with our Missouri people. We can do a follow up this next week on Missouri and how that's going.
And then I saw
Nebraska.
that at a Maryland House map there. I know that's a Democrat state, of course. I think they usually have 1 Republican seat, so it would probably be an attempt to zero that one out.
It's 1.
Yeah. So then there's Nebraska and Kansas. So Kansas could redraw their maps. Nebraska could get the winner take all kind of energy and maybe
which we have no faith in.
We're still one shot.
Nebraska could
great
redraw, but
conservatives.
as is, there's still 3 Republicans right now, right? I don't think we'd get new seats. It would just be securing.
They're
it.
worried
No, they
about
would
Don
re-
Bacon.
they would- they would gerrymander out.
It's basically assumed at
Make
this
it
point
redder.
it's not a red seat, so it's a plus like 3 or 4 Dem seat that Don Bacon just has won
because he's a moderate.
But Don Bacon's retiring, and so the fear is that they're going to lose if they don't redistrict.
Yes.
Yeah.
They're going to lose that seat.
So go zero in on Indiana now.
Yeah.
Indiana, there is a push because they had a chance to redistrict, they failed. 1 minute left.
So right now, the state Senate, they still can do it, but there's essentially holdouts of it depends on the day, but we have about 5 or 6 state senators that are holding out. The White House came out really strong. The president came out really strong, like, hey, we're going to find people to challenge these people. And there's good conservatives in Indiana across the state. We're talking in each of these districts. We need the audience to start to get to know these people because we need to replace them. So we're not talking districts where Trump won by 5 or 6. We're talking districts that Trump won by 30 or 40 points.
Jeez.
And so the president feels very strongly that we can find the right people. Turning Point Action will help him. Will help the president in identifying some of these people and get the word out.
All right. So We need to know how to help and what to do next. So,
Well, Indiana could still fix this. They could still get the redistricting done, avoid all of that conflict, and just get it over with.
so if you are an Indiana legislator that stood in the way of the redistricting fight, there's still time to save your political future. This does not have to go this way. But we got to save the republic. It's too important. All right, I'm going to tell you guys really quickly. Again, send us your emails, freedom@charliekirk.com, questions for Turning Point Action, and we want to hear about them.